Johnny Carson has been off the air for many years, but what an honor to be here. You kind of, what a week. How are people doing? Huh? So we want to try to start off here with, the five stages of grief? Just to kind of see where people might be, and some may be well beyond that. How many currently are in denial? All right, we've got a couple of deniers, okay. Climate as well, apparently. How many are in kind of the rejection mode? We've got a handful of rejection, not quite there. What's that next phase you go through? Trial rejection. Anger, and guilt. Anger and guilt row. Okay, all right, that's good. How many are starting to now kind of come out of that wherever you've been voting, and maybe have a little bit of hope of a better world of where we're going? How many are like, we're on board, man, we are now there, all good? And how many are just waiting for the next 30 minutes till drinks? No, it really has been quite a week. And for me personally, this is truly a great honor. Zeev has been called many things by many people, but in many ways he's kind of a genie who makes dreams and wishes come true. Great speakers that we have here, right? Really great speakers we've had here all day. We get a really well-run event throughout the couple of days. Everything seems to go on time. There's generally enough seats for everybody, or you can get to stand up and it's really great. The food and the breaks have been really good. And a while ago, Zeev also will ask these very interesting questions and kind of ask me, what would be the one thing you'd really like to do? And I said, someday I'd like to host the late night show. Right? I mean, we had Carson, we heard his music. We've had Letterman and Leno, right? You hear it for David Letterman, the top 10 lists. Arsenio, who was truly cool, the coolest guy we've had in the shows. And now we've got the Stephen Colbert, we've got the two Jimmys, and we've got Seth, right? All those areas. So it's tough to kind of break into that group. But I said, that's kind of what I'd like to do. I'd like to be able to host a late night show. Apparently I should have taken Apple stock, but we'll take what we have here. But thank you, Zeev, for giving me that great piece. So it really is quite an honor, and it's really one of the first times I've been able to be on a stage like this since a number of years ago when I was on The Apprentice. It was I was a judge on The Apprentice. It was the highest rated apprentice of all time. It was huge, I'll tell you, I can assure you of that. It was really a great show, and I did spend several days, and I mean, it's kind of hard to say, but with the president-elect, now president-elect. And it was kind of an interesting experience. I can share a few stories. I'll share one, and I won't share the whole part of it. But given how people were on the grieving thing, sometimes humor can be helpful as we go through that. But one of the first things he did, and a very impressive guy, very knowledgeable about the business. I was running Post cereals at the time, and he's very knowledgeable about our business and things like that. And he introduced me to his daughter, Ivanka, who, by the way, is delightful. And his first piece he said was, so my daughter, Ivanka, went to Wharton, finished number 1 in her class. Which I was pretty impressed by. And as we went to the side, I went to Ivanka, and I said, that's great, you're number 1 in your class at Wharton, that's really impressive. And she just shook her head, and I said, what do you mean you weren't number 1? Well, like top 5? No. Top 10? You graduated from Wharton, right? So she was kind of middle of the class. I said, well, why would your dad sort of say that? She just said, I never really fully believe everything he says. But anyway, we'll get off on that area because we as a group have decided he's the guy to be our president, and we'll talk a little bit about that and put that in the context of having that said, the great role that I think we in this room now have to play to really step up on key social issues. These issues that we're dealing with aren't going away, but the odds may be that others in this room, whether in the nonprofit sector, grantors or grantees or the corporate sector and other innovators are really going to need to step up here to make an impact and a difference. In preparation for tonight's meeting, today's late night show, I did sit down with Seth Meyers. How many Seth Meyers fans out there? Right. Come on, how many Seth Meyers fans out there, right? Yeah, let's hear it. So pretty good, and Seth did give now the president-elect quite a bit of trouble during the election for those who follow. And as I sat down, we were at a dinner, had dinner with him. Of course, there were 800 people there, but we were at the same table, and I kind of asked him about this, how really amazing it was that any millennials here? All right, that's good, that's fine. We love millennials, are great. Come on, it's our future. Got to keep paying into Social Security and all that stuff, so we got to do that. But great, we have a lot of millennials ourselves. And asked him, I said, it's really amazing that you in late night TV is one of the top news sources, right behind Facebook, as the power news sources. I said, you've got to really feel proud about that. And he looked at me and he shook his head and he said, nah, just scared. But it is kind of a time when we've seen the news sources, the big data, the polls, all that stuff that those in the blue states thought were happening, and there was a whole bunch of other people having some different views in the world. And hopefully that one of the outtakes we can take from this is an opportunity to really kind of discuss some of these issues that we might have flown over, right, as we go from New York here to the West Coast and all the rest. And there are people there who missed and who are really hurting and who are not comfortable with some of the institutions and some of the trends. So we'll talk a little about that tonight. But it is great to be here and to kind of host the show. Thanks, Zeev. Big round of applause for Zeev. And I'll tell you, we have got a great show tonight. This is like one of the best. We have brought in people with expertise in cable, not cable TV, the actually making of cable, in communications and in cars, and not actually driving cars, but calling the people who will drive you from the guys at Lyft. On that, we've got global CEOs, we've got North American CEOs, we've got people playing huge roles within those companies. I think you're really going to enjoy the show. So everybody ready for late night? We're good? All right, very good. And I'd like to kind of introduce here, because usually it'd be a commercial break right now, so I would sit down. And by the way, just one other thing. If you look in your program, everybody have their program in front of you? You kind of look through the pages, and we have the morning, and you can look at the orange type, and it's like, what, 12-point pica or something like that? Elite. And you go to the afternoon session, and it's like 12-point elite pica. And then we get to this, and it's like in 100-point late night type. I mean, this has got to be big. So we got to pick it up here, and Zeev says we got to make this thing happen. All right, so with that, let me introduce the CEO, former CEO of Southwire Cable, a guy who's really created one of the most innovative programs that I've seen in the social space, is Mr. Stu Thorn. Stu Thorn, come on down. Well, welcome, Stu. It's good to have you here today. We've known each other for quite a while.
We've known each other quite a while. I know each other so long that I threatened Daryl I was going to tell him he looked a lot taller on TV. But I decided that's probably not a good idea. Remember the Voodoo Lounge tour?
We did have the Voodoo Lounge tour back. We both worked at Campbell Soup in the international group. Stu was the guy who cranked out all of the numbers, and I was on the marketing side, and we spent all of the money. So it was a good combination.
So we called ourselves the Voodoo Lounge tour because we traveled all around the world. Little did I know I'd be on a set evocative of that actual tour.
Yes, that's right. Very much so. We had some terrific trips as we did that. Now, since that time, you've been in some of really manufacturer heavy industry in a lot of red states. Is that fair?
I have been in red states. That's right. And in fact, because I've been in red states, I recognize that tie.
This is a great tie.
You want to explain to everybody where that tie was manufactured and by who?
Well, first is, and if you'll read, this was one of the many gifts you get when you get on The Apprentice show. And if you read that tie.
Donald J. Trump's signature collection. What do you think of that?
So wear that. And here you can see where it's made.
Made in China.
Okay, there we go. That was sort of a different era. But anyway, but yes, this is a tie. This is probably the last time I'll ever wear this tie. As we
well, we like that tie in Tennessee.
In Tennessee, it's fairly popular. So tell us, since the days there, you've worked in the carpet industry, cable industry. How has that been?
Well, when I went into the cable industry, which is the last industry I moved into before I just retired, that was 15 years ago. I went to work for a company called Southwire, which is a family-owned business and 50 years old. And up until that point, it had only been run by two people, the founder and then his oldest son. So I was the first outside CEO to ever run that company.
And that's based, you're way in the deep south, right? West?
It's, it's west of Atlanta. It's a small town about 60 miles west of Atlanta. So it's kind of one of America's last great small towns, I call it.
Okay, great.
But anyway, so I went into this company, and it had a history of being philanthropic, as family companies often are.
Biggest employer in town, I take it.
Biggest employer in town, along with the university and the medical center in town.
Okay.
Anyway, they had a philanthropic budget, and suddenly I was responsible for spending that money. And of course, I wanted to give the money to the University of Pennsylvania rowing team, because that's what I did in college.
So you went to Penn?
I went to Penn. Okay. I actually went to Wharton like Donald, except I actually
graduated.
My uncle didn't help me get in. But anyway, so I decided, listen, this isn't my money, but I'm being in a position where I need to give it away. I need to go to the board with some criteria and the family and talk to them about, how do they want to guide me in this. So I suggested 3 criteria. One, that we would do things that were local. I mean, world hunger is a big problem, but not something that Southwire really necessarily was in a good position to address. So focus on local things. Second, focus on things where we could get our people involved, not just our money, because our people is really what makes us special, and that's the real asset we bring into our communities. And then third, and this turned out to be controversial, I suggested we do things that we also get some kind of a benefit from. And the reason it was controversial is the chairman of the board, who was the principal shareholder and had my job before me, a family member, thought that sounded greedy and selfish and felt like philanthropy should be all about altruism, not about selfish interest. But the board I was new and they wanted to support me, so there was some discussion, and reluctantly the chairman let me sort of walk away with those 3 criteria, because I explained that if we can do things that are good for the company as well as for the community, then we can do more of it, because it kind of becomes a virtuous circle. So I went to my team and I suggested, I asked what kinds of things could we do that would meet those 3 criteria, and they instantly focused on education. We were growing very quickly, and we needed labor. And
you did not have enough people to fill the jobs.
Didn't have enough people to fill the jobs in the factories that we had in town and elsewhere around the country. And so the thought was, listen, we've got one of the highest dropout rates in the country in our county. If we can reduce that dropout rate, we'll increase our labor force, because we only hired people with high school degrees. That was a policy.
And what kind of graduation rate was there when you got there?
The graduation rate in this county in Georgia was down around 70%, so you had 30% dropping out, okay. And that was very high, and that was 30% not in the labor force. So so my team, we iterated back and forth. We got some community leaders in the room with us in our boardroom, and the team and I and the community came up with the idea of what we call 12 for life. But anyway, to make a long story short.
12 for life.
12 for life, meaning if you finish 12 years of school, you'll have a better life. So to make a long story short, we actually bought a factory in town that was empty. It was, we paid a couple of $1 million for it, and we outfitted it with real equipment to make real products. And we gathered, the functions we gathered into that factory were safe, but necessary jobs that were being scattered around the company. And we staffed that facility 100% with kids that the local school system, the county school system, said were about to drop out of school. So to get into this program, you had to be failing. If you were doing well in school, you weren't considered for the program. You had to be struggling with grades, attendance, financial issues.
Family situations, the whole thing, okay.
So that became 100% the staffing of this facility. Of course, we provided supervisors and training and what have you. The school system provided teachers, so there was a guidance counselor in the facility and teachers.
Teaching literally in the plant?
In the plant, yeah. There was we built a schoolhouse within the factory. And so these kids would work half their school day working in this plant, and the other half going to school. So it's during the school day, not after the school day, earning a wage, but also learning leadership skills, applied mathematics, etc. And then it would also, the teachers would be in this facility to teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic. And as a result of that, we were able to get the graduation rate for this cohort of kids up from probably what would have been 5 or 10% up to over 80%, which was well above the average of the entire school system. And in the process, Southwire also made about $2 million a year because we paid these kids much more than they would have earned otherwise after school, and they earned it now during school. But very productive workforce and very motivated and very eager. So not only did we increase the graduation rate substantially and help the school system and help the community, but we also helped ourselves by making money, and yes, we also developed our labor force because a lot of these kids went on to work for Southwire and other companies, and many of them went on to higher education. So it's been a real success. We've now graduated over 1,300 kids into the county since we started this, who otherwise would have most likely failed out of school.
Great stuff, great stuff. Great program. So you were in West Carrollton, Georgia. Great program. As only Stu would do, he actually made money on this thing, which allowed you to do more.
Right.
Is this something that has legs? I mean, is this something that could be expanded more broadly?
Yeah.
We know there's a huge issue on jobs and preparation for the workplace.
Yeah, actually, Harvard asked the same question because they did a case study on scaling this, and I actually go teach it at Harvard every year now. But yeah, so once this was successful, the state noticed, and they got a hold of us and said, hey, would you be willing to promote this across the state? They put together an organization called Great Promise Partnership, funded by the state mostly, plus some private contributions from companies like us. And for the last several years, that organization has been promoting this idea. I've chaired the oversight committee for this organization. But anyway, it's been promoting 12 for Life. And now about 25, 30 companies in Georgia have implemented similar programs with similar levels of success. Not necessarily on as big a scale, although some of them are approaching that. We now have 150 kids in this full time at any given moment. But some of them just have a couple of kids in an office environment. You don't have to be a manufacturer, you can be a service business. You don't have to be a private business, you can be a public business, you can be a not-for-profit business. We've got examples of all of those kinds of organizations that are following these principles of creating an opportunity for kids to come in during the school day, work and learn simultaneously, and focusing particularly on at-risk kids, and by so doing helping improve the graduation rate dramatically. So it can work, and I'd be glad, I will say, to work with any of you if you want to put in a similar program. Personally, I'll work with you and also give you access to examples in Georgia where it is been so successful. You can come and take a look and take notes and ask questions, and anyway, be glad to help you implement similar programs in your own organizations.
One last question. We have great other guests coming on board. I understand you've taught this at the Harvard Business School.
Yeah.
A lot of bright people up at Harvard. How positive were they? How positive were they to the whole endeavor?
Well, it's really fascinating because I've now done this several years in a row. I'm going to do it again in March. And it's one of the most popular case studies actually in Harvard Business School, which is pretty cool. Pretty big accomplishment for a Wharton graduate to have all these Harvard students studying this. But it's almost always the same. The kids they've all read the case, and they're not kids, they're young adults, but they've read the case, and they get into a really interesting discussion about it. They're obviously really turned on about what we've done and how cool it is. But then they start sort of talking about, yeah, but what about safety, and what about exploitation, what about this? They come up with all these possible issues, and by the end of the class, it's like their balloon has been deflated, and they're sort of saying, well, it's a great idea for Southwire, but I don't think it would work anywhere else. And then I get the fun of standing up and saying, I like to quote Stephen Covey. He says, a strength taken too far becomes a weakness. And I sort of explain to them, you are among the smartest people in the world, so that's a great strength. But when you take that strength too far and you start thinking about everything that can go wrong because you're so smart, you talk yourselves out of doing something that otherwise could be tremendously beneficial. And then I point out that 25 or 30 other companies are doing this, that we've never run into, that we've been able to manage our way through safety issues and exploitation issues and all of that, and that none of them have ever materialized to become a problem. So anyway, it's kind of fun to help them think about the dangers of talking themselves out of doing something new because of all the pitfalls you can run into, but instead think positively about how you can address those pitfalls and do something really groundbreaking. So,
Stu Thorn, let's hear it for him.
thank you.
Good stuff. Yes, sir. Now we'd like to bring up our next guest is Marian Salzman. Marian's with Havas. Let's get the music up. How are you? You too?
Selfie. How utterly hip and uncool. Robbie, you're dead.
No, so welcome. We're
you.
glad to have you here today. Tell us a little bit about, we're going to start easy here, then we're going to get a little tougher, but tell us a little bit about Havas. I mean, one of the great ad agencies of the world. You run North America. And
I run the PR companies around the globe. Day to day, I feel like I live in the cloud. I start in New York. I end up in Phoenix. I offices around the U.S. We are probably best known for our work in the social cause space. So we work for all kinds of initiatives, a lot of United Nations Foundation work.
Yep.
We take a little bit of pride in helping to get rid of that horrible phrase, global warming, because in fact people thought that was a good thing. And just learning.
Minneapolis loves it.
Well, Minneapolis loves it, but you'd be amazed. So do a lot of ladies in northern England who thought it was a really fabulous thing, would give them better summers. So literally having to go out and train thousands of scientists to actually serve as advocates that climate change was a bad thing, not a good thing. So that's been the last couple of years. But we also oftentimes step in, and we had a staff member who had a family member murdered in Newtown. We went in and we provided media relations support to keep the press out for all of those families that needed it, and then went about finding them attorneys and accountants and so on to set up charities around their fallen kids or fallen spouses or moms or dads. So we try to be very, very active in terms of when something happens in the world, we step in. My most exciting step in was the morning of the earthquake in Haiti. I stepped into the life of Wycliffe Jean, who became an icon for raising money, good and bad in Haiti. So we spent more than a year of our lives kind of working in and around Haiti. I'm here to tell you, it's the most barren, horrible, wonderful place on the planet. I don't know if any of us can help them. There's just so much wrong with the infrastructure. You get an MRI machine there and it gets as far as the port of Port-au-Prince, but you can't get it unloaded, let alone taken to a hospital. So yeah, we do some good work. We also do a lot of corporate work.
Right. Corporate work can still be good work.
Yes, it can be good work.
But you also, I mean, but part of that is sort of the importance of the narrative, right? The stories around the social area are just so helpful to get people to understand in a really complicated world what matters, what they can focus on, and the likes. That's an incredibly important part of the social movement.
It's probably in some ways learning how to write the narrative, learning how to create the words that become the narrative, learning how to newsjack. So something is happening in the world and you step in and you create a secondary storyline that allows you to sort of change and do good things. We were involved with a benefit last week, which inadvertently sort of changed narrative. We were publicizing and promoting the Bob Woodruff Foundation event to raise money for veterans and their caregivers. And Jon Stewart came on stage and decided to share his 4-year running Twitter war with Donald Trump. So any of you who haven't seen that, enjoy. It was hard, given that you had all kinds of people of all kinds of political persuasions in the room.
Sure.
Lots of very, very active military, lots of very important politicians, many.
This was before the election.
It was before,
First.
and it was an interesting night. And the mem will live on for many, many years.
That's great. Now, you are also one of the great trend predictors, forecasters.
And on my tombstone, it will say metrosexual, unless any of you can help me come up with something else. Because for 13 years, I have carried this burden.
You are the person who coined the phrase.
No, I did not coin it.
You did not coin it?
I did not
You
coin
got-
it. I found the phrase on the South Island of New Zealand. I hijacked the phrase to refer to the genre of men, about 30% who wanted to be the best friends, best lovers, and best shopping partners for the women in their lives. Luckily for me, it was about 8 weeks before Queer Eye for Straight Guy happened.
Okay.
I wish I could say I was doing it for altruistic reasons, but in fact, we were launching the Peroni beer brand. Miller Beer, SAB Miller, had just purchased Peroni. They were looking for a place in the landscape, particularly in the US and the UK, for a full calorie light beer, and I needed to come up with something really smart because I wanted a beach house that summer, and I had no prayer in hell of getting a bonus unless I won a really big piece of business. I knew the CMO there, and he said to me if he could see me and one of my ideas on the front page of a major global newspaper in the next 6 weeks, he would take it to his board and displace his existing roster. And I stayed up nights and weekends looking for that idea. And Jason Blair had just screwed up with the New York Times, so I had all this beer data, but I also had all my private questions about male sexuality, etc. And I got the New York Times to agree that they wouldn't disclose my beer data if I gave them my gender data. And so that was how I transacted that, and it was utterly awesome, never to be repeated again, because in the age of social media, you would never be able to keep something on the front page of the Daily Telegraph and then hold it for the New York Times for 3 more weeks. Wow. That was then, this is now.
Now, we've talked a bit about the election here. What's your sense? Did you forecast this result?
Yes, I did. Unfortunately, because I lost friends over that. I mean, most people have lost friends over the political things. I was losing friends because I was saying, Mrs. Clinton is not going to win. I'm really sorry. And that was because, unlike many people that live in their echo chambers, my work forces me to be in the real world. So all those places y'all are flying over, I'm going and looking at other people's supermarket carts in their trash cans. I'm looking for those great insights you find the way real people live in real places. So I kind of knew there was no passion. So data is a really dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing if you're looking at it for causes. It's a dangerous thing if you're looking at it, because if you don't understand the passion behind the data, if it's just a yes or a no, it's not going to really help you. People who are yes for Mr. Trump were yes really passionately. Mm-hmm. People who were yes for Mrs. Clinton, a big portion of them were yes because I have no other choice. And that was something that I was picking up on all summer and really became very clear to me even after all those well-studied debates where people would do exit polls and I would think she won. Mm-hmm. And I would find out not. And so I would go to other people's newspapers in Ohio. I probably visited Wisconsin. She didn't, unfortunately. It was a lot of looking and reading and studying, and yeah, it was really clear.
Sure. And you've called this now Joe.
Well, Joe's six-pack is a problem. So you had metrosexual man, and then you had emo man, and emo man was even more needy than metrosexual man. Emo man was really, he was sort of taking his therapist, if not his mother, with him to bed, not figuratively, but like kind of whispering in his ear. And then the pushback for that really, because remember, metrosexual man was like 30-something%. It wasn't the vast majority, it was the emerging minority. And Joe's six-pack was the pushback, and that was the guy who wanted to reclaim everything masculine. And I saw Sarah Palin on TV about 7 or 8 months ago saying that Joe's six-pack finally had an icon. It was Donald Trump. And I'm thinking a man who has his nails buffed should not be an icon for Joe's six-pack. But don't worry about any real cues. People can convince themselves of anything. So I did have a sense that this was Joe's six-pack's last stand. And it put the politics all aside. My husband always says I live in the land of stereotypes, but there's a reason stereotypes so often prevail. Because there's a pattern behind them that's sort of a big story. So that was, I kind of knew.
Very cool, very cool. All right, let's hear it. Very good. Thank you, Marian. And we'll bring up our last guest, Mike Masserman, out of Lyft. Thank you. Are these guests great or what tonight, huh? Let's hear it for them. So now, let's just start here. How would you describe, just looking at Mike, how would you describe him?
Well, first of all, he's just brought Lyft to Connecticut, so I am deeply grateful to have an alternative. There should always be two players. I think he's probably lightly metrosexual with a twist of designer intrigue.
Ooh, I like her.
There we go.
I like her. Fist bump.
And while we're at it, Stu, with the whole beard thing, what are we thinking?
So he is another kind of stereotype, very preppy, and I thought right away rower, and then he said crew, and I got it.
All right.
Very cool. Mike, welcome. We're glad to have you here.
Great to be here.
You're here with us. Now, you have a great back because you're a lawyer, right?
I was.
No longer. You've been bi-coastal in D.C., government offices, West Coast, went to Michigan, University of Michigan.
Go Blue.
Go Blue. All right, we've got the group there. and you're now at Lyft, which is sort of the good guys, right, in this whole thing. How is that whole experience going?
Yeah, so it's going great, first
Right.
of all. I mean, look, Lyft was the first peer-to-peer ride-sharing company, right? The idea was, how do you safely, affordably, and reliably get people to share rides with strangers, right? It's the one thing that your mom always told you never do, never get into a car with a stranger. And not only are we encouraging people to get into cars with strangers, but at Lyft, we were actually encouraging people to sit up front, maybe have a conversation. And you push a button, and someone comes to your house, and you have this opportunity to meet someone, different background, maybe lives in a completely different community than you, and have an amazing experience. And that infusion of humanity into technology, I think, is really important. And an earlier person was talking about the fact that we're so connected, but we're lonely. And so through Lyft, you actually can create these connections, and I think drivers really love that.
Okay. That's great. That's great. Now, what are some of the values at Lyft? I mean, certainly there's Uber out there that's playing well known. Lyft is sort of the upstart in the space. What are some of the values that you all look to practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, Lyft is a community-based organization, and it's really, from my perspective, been a real force for good. So there's a few different buckets I think we can look at it. First, there's an economic empowerment bucket, right? This is a platform for flexible work. People who are caregivers, right? People who are freelancers, folks who are in between jobs or looking for supplemental income can make a few extra bucks, and that can make a huge difference in their lives. The second bucket is transportation is a huge pain point for lots of different communities. Folks from the accessibility community who've had tremendous difficulties with public transit or taxis. Ride sharing is transformative. Seniors, ride sharing has been transformative. We've been able to partner with organizations like Joining Forces to do rides for homeless veterans to interviews, or with Dress for Success to partner to allow women to get rides to interviews. And the third bucket, which is I think most exciting for me, is that it's been a platform for me to advocate for various policy positions that are aligned with Lyft's values. So whether that's climate, whether that's inclusivity and LGBT rights, where, by the way, there's a great story where on the same day that the Mississippi governor signed into law ride-sharing legislation, he also signed into law anti-LGBT legislation like North Carolina. 2 letters given to our CEO, one that says congratulations, the other says shame on you. Which one do you want to sign? Mike, of course I'm going to sign the one that says shame on you, because even if we have legislation, we'll never be the kind of community that we want to be and have the ride-sharing platform that we need to have if we don't have that inclusive type of community. And another example is we partnered with the White House on an organization called It's On Us. This is to reduce sexual assault in college campuses. You can imagine our comms team, when I brought this to them, I mean, this is the last thing they want people to think about, but this is a value-driven company, and we thought it was important, and so we signed the pledge and encouraged everyone in our company and all of our drivers to sign the pledge. And that, I think, has been really exciting from a policy perspective because, again, values matter to our leadership, and we've been able to, I think, articulate that with the policies that we've
Great stuff.
supported.
That's great stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff that Lyft there. Looking to the future, one question. Then we'll ask just 1 or 2 questions here for the group, and as we go on, a lot of talk now about driverless cars. How do you guys think about that? Where do you see the world headed?
Yeah, so look, we believe that in the next 5 years, the majority of Lyft rides actually are going to be done through autonomous vehicles. In the meantime, fewer people are buying cars, and so ride sharing is going to continue to grow, especially in places right now where we don't have it, like rural communities and suburban communities. So there's always going to be a need for human drivers in the foreseeable future. But it's coming sooner than later, and there's going to be a dramatic impact on our lives. I mean, 90% of accidents could get reduced. It'll be, again, transformative for seniors and for those with disabilities, but it's also going to transform cities. Think about all the different parking lots that we have right now that can be transformed into parks. And so that's why we've been collaborating not just with people in the Department of Transportation, but also city planners, land use experts. And I think the final point is that we don't envision a world where everyone is sitting in pods by themselves. We envision a world where people are in pods sharing these rides. Maybe it's an NPR pod, right? Maybe it's a religious pod. Maybe it's a singles pod, like a Tinder pod, right?
Tinder pod, there we go.
Tinder pod. We just think that there's an amazing opportunity for autonomous, and we see a very bright future.
Very cool, very cool. We're going to wrap up here with just one question for the group, which is great. So we've gone through kind of an interesting week, right? And is there a word or two that you would share for the group about how you're feeling about where we are as a country, where we are as a world, to kind of think about and recognize that you're between your comments and drinks? So we'll let us start here. Now we've had a fairly diverse audience here, so let's start with Stu.
I hate to say it, I'm excited. I was one of the few who sort of raised my hand on that because we actually have a pure businessman who's now president of the United States. And yes, I'm not saying the guy's perfect, but it's really the first time in my lifetime we've had a real business person in that office. We are all business people, and if we can help him be successful, I think we take the image of business people and we lift it. If he fails, I think we will sink with him in terms of our reputations as business people. I think America looks at him as a sort of a mandate on business. So I'm excited because I think we can work with the guy and help him be successful. And I guess call me an optimist. I do realize he has issues, but if we can help him be successful, I think we have this golden opportunity to increase our stock price, so to speak, in the eyes of the American public, and that could pay dividends for many generations to come.
Thanks, Stu. Marian.
So for me, I think there is lots and lots and lots of dialogue about glass ceilings, and I think the only glass we're going to talk about for the next couple of years, if things go well, are the rose-colored glasses. I think that we're going to have to accept that it's going to be a bizarre mix of nostalgia and futurism. We better hope that the futurism side, that the optimists among us drive us to a place where the future looks better and more rose-colored because we didn't break the ceiling.
Look, the Obama alumni in me, it feels like
You
the
worked on the
activist.
2008, right?
I worked on the 08 campaign, I worked in the administration, and now I'm feeling like energized to organize and to activate. But on the other hand, I think that we need just a discussion on empathy on both sides, right? It's a great word to throw out there, but in reality, I think that there's just not a lot of connectivity, and we don't have that space to really see each other. I went to college in Michigan, but even just in Michigan, the difference between Ann Arbor and just a few miles out of Ann Arbor, there needs to be some discussion. So I'm hopeful that this is an opportunity for us to better see each other and to really understand what empathy means.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear for our panel here on the show. We thank everybody. Thank you all.
Great job, guys. Great job. Great job. All right, everybody. And so with that, we conclude the end of day one. I have one simple and easy request. I hope I get our logo slide. Events like this take a village. If you see anyone that's part of our partners and our supporters, just thank them. There's so many people who really dedicate themselves to making this a success. And so if you have the moment, any of these logos, just shake their hand and say thank you for helping out. And to you, the audience, thank you so much for a wonderful day. We'll see you in the morning.